I guess what I want to start with is what exactly is this and what are we doing here? And actually even before that, like thank you for showing up for something that's a little like vague and I don't know, not very clear of what this is. It just feels amazing to have your beautiful faces here and just to be, I don't know, following whatever unfolds between all of us. Um, when this came through of doing this, I had this sense of um, there's so much wisdom in every single one of us, and it comes through in such a different way, and it comes through in different moments to activate something, within ourselves or each other. And so I just feel really inspired. I do so much work alone. I'm such like a little crazy mad scientist writing and creating, and half the time I feel really connected, and it feels actually really enlivening, like very erotic to be this creative, but I also feel such a longing to be in connection around some of the things that I'm playing with, that I'm curious about. And so that was a lot of the reason is I just want to know, I want to be engaging with this whole journey around what is power and what does it mean when we have it and what does it mean when we don't, and um, what can we learn from each other. So I think I want to share, what do I want to share? Um, maybe because it's the first time, I want to give a little bit about my journey, and we're going to open it up. I'm going to make a lot of room to hear your voices and have conversation. And I'm happy if somebody wants to explore something more deeply to do a little, on the spot coaching, like whatever emerges. But um, I want to go back a little in time because I think that I've been on a journey really exploring, like, why the fuck am I here on this planet? Like, what am I doing here? What is the purpose of all of this ultimately? And I think I've been asking that question probably since I was a teenager. And I remember reading all these books like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I was just anything I could do to get my hands on something that was talking about something deeper than the conversations around me. And my journey took me down a road where I became a business consultant, and I really love that work. But in 2016, when we had the election, I woke up with so much shock, and I had this really strong voice come in that was like, you have to do something else. You have to expand what you're doing. And long story short, a dear friend of mine who she and her husband were in California doing some therapy around their incongruency around their sexual connection. And she called me from California. She's like, sister, you got to get your ass out here. Like, you were meant to do this work. And I was like, okay. And I had been in such a depression. I was just really kind of plummeted in that question of like, why the hell am I here? And so long story short, I did go out to California and I did this program called Somatica, which is a sex and relationship program, but it's somatic based. So it was based on a training I had already done, which is called Hakomi. It's a body-centered psychotherapy. And it took me on such an amazing journey, a journey of awakening parts of myself that I felt were not safe to be here in my body or in the planet, like expressions of my energy, expressions of myself. I saw places that I was totally giving my power away. I saw places where I was like taking power, and it was so illuminating. So when I finished that, I was like this rebel in me. I was like, I don't care what it costs. I'm going to burn the house down. I am going to follow this to the end of the earth. And so I built this website called Your Erotic Nature. Lots of skin pictures of me on it, like just kind of took it to the max. And simultaneously, I have this business consulting practice. And I'm like, holy shit, how am I actually going to bring this into the world? And this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, first of all, I have a terror of being visible, because being visible for me has often felt being scapegoated and exiled and misunderstood and blamed for things I didn't do. So there was just that terror was alive in me. And then there's just this sense of very primal security level. Like, what if all my business clients see this and they're just like, who's this woman? What the hell are we doing? Are we working with a prostitute? Like, what's going on here? Like, and I get fired. So I had so much to grapple with around what am I going to make more important? My deep longing to bring to follow my heart, or my survival, my safety. And I went for it. And I emailed all my clients, business clients, and I said, I'm doing this thing on the side. I just want you to know. I want you to know what it's about. Erotic is not about sex. I mean, that's part of it, but it's about life force. And so I, tried to explain it. And I was like, okay, but we will just fall away and life will take care of me financially if this all crumbles. So I did that. And it wasn't very long before I had this, like, one of my crazy scientist moments where I was like, okay, now what I have to do is I have to map the erotic mind. I have to understand exactly what it is about erotic energy and why it's so compelling, not just for procreation, like sexually, but also why it gives us purpose and meaning of being here, to have our life energy flowing with so much conviction. So I started designing what I was experiencing as the erotic architecture. Like, how does that link to enlightenment? How does that link to, I don't even like that word really, because it's like there's a destination, but how does that link to embodiment, essentially? Which for me has been such a big journey around embracing the shadows, embracing all the places. Like I said, in that sexuality training, I saw places where I was like taking power. So as I was building that, I had that voice come in again. It was like, this is too narrow, keep going. I was like, are you kidding me? I was at a friend's house. She was out of town. It was just basically, it's in the mountains, and it was all glass. And I had sticky notes. Brooke, you would so appreciate this. I had sticky notes everywhere. Like, everything that was coming through had a name and it had a something. And so I just let that happen for 2 days. And then I was meditating, it was sunset, and all of a sudden it just came through so quickly. And I got up and I started moving all the things around, and like there was the Power Reclamation system, this map that came through. I was like, wow, really? And erotic power was one of them. So and so basically your erotic nature has folded into one of the 6 gateways. And it was at that time where I realized, okay, well, now I have to follow this. Like, I guess it's now I have to scrap that website and follow this thing and discover what it is. So for the next year and a half, I mean, I was probably writing, and I was working full time. I was probably writing like 8 hours a day. I couldn't sleep. I was just like, stuff was coming through so fast I could hardly keep up with it. And then I had this massive crash, like almost this, it was like I had been so full on with the creative energy, and I had been so immersed in probably all the dopamine and all the drugs that come. It's like having sex 24 hours. It's just not sustainable. That I crashed, and I felt really lost. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? What is this thing? And how am I going to take 500 pages of writing and put that into anything? And this was way too overwhelming. And so I had to sit with that for a while. And, I think all of this to say that what I realized is that this isn't something that I'm downloading and I'm this expert in. This is actually something that I'm meant to live into until I die. And I'm meant to live into it with others. And sure, I have life experience that will contribute to my perception of power and the ways that I give power away, the ways that I take power out of fear. But what I really get is that the reason I have felt so stuck in the last year is because this has to be engaged with, and this has to be brought to life by a tribe, like by a larger collective. And it's already happening. Like, I'm using Power Reclamation, but every single one of you is it has your own verbiage for how you're doing the same thing, which is coming home to self. Really, it's all just whatever costume we put on it. So I think my whole point of that is just to give you a sense about why this is so important to me. One is that I want to follow, regardless of how the world perceives me, I want to follow what's true. And it's terrifying. It's, you know, it's, I don't have, I haven't had in about 2 or 3 months, I haven't had any dreams of being burned at the stake, but I was having them frequently. It was like, it just, my body, it wasn't even my mind. My body was like, you cannot do that. You can't talk about this stuff. You can't bring this into the world in this way. And, and then yet something else is like, oh yeah, you can. And oh yes, you will. So I think that the main place where I'm really working power reclamation right now is my deep, I mean, there's lots of places actually, but the one is around erotic power. And Marie, it was so amazing because Marie sent a text to Helani and I this morning about how her angle of how she's working this to the bone right now. And, I'll let you speak to that later if you want to. But in terms of myself, it feels like erotic power is probably the most charged power on the gateway on the power reclamation system for so many reasons. You guys are shaking your heads. Like everybody can kind of get why it's so charged. One is that I think our culture needs a re-education about what erotic actually is, because it's always positioned as sexuality, but it's so much larger than that. It's our life force. And also on a personal level, it's so charged for me because since I've been a teenager, I guess probably when I've been most aware, probably, my whole life, I have had, like, that's probably one of my stronger power types is the erotic of the six. So it's centering, relational, self-acceptance, intuitive, wild, and erotic. And erotic meaning like joy and life force and just like this buoyancy that would just come through me. It was just this radiance of like a hunger for life, but it often would get channeled through sexuality, and it became dangerous. And so it was a power that I really didn't know what to do with, and I didn't know what to do with people's interpretation of it, because I didn't really think, I would have never known that it was a specific thing that I was bringing. I couldn't even have identified it as separate than me, and yet it kept getting me into so much trouble. And so I think the edge that I'm working now is twofold. It's like, how do I do my own healing of the shadows that live in me around claiming this power as like a really important gateway for human evolution? And how do I work this in, this is a much more tangible thing, but the bigger question that I'm living with right now is, how do I bring this into business, or do I? And every time it's like, I don't want to change my map, the power reclamation system, because people in business are going to be scared of it. And every time I think of changing the name erotic to creative just to accommodate business people, there's this like fiery thing inside that's like, fuck no, I will not do that. And so, I'm not sure what to do with all of that, because I feel I don't think life is ready for it. So I'm just sitting with all of it, and there's a lot that's churning in me around this power itself, and what's mine to do with it, and what my healing is around it, which is probably why it's so strong right now. And I think the last thing I'll say is, like, this is a real fear. I was delivering a corporate retreat last spring, and it was a newer client. I work with the two main executives, but they had all their leadership team on it. And after the first training, this guy calls me from that I hadn't known. He's a leader, on the leadership team. And he's like, I owe you an apology. I was like, okay. He's like, I saw your website. And he's like, and I saw this thing about erotic, and you lost all credibility with me. I wanted nothing to do with you. And I was like, I get it. And tell me more. And so he told me more about it. And, we ended up in a conversation about the repression of his own eroticism. But that was, in that moment, I had this like, oh, like complete, the very thing that I'm so afraid that people are thinking, they're thinking, it's happening. So Um, I don't think I want to necessarily say anything more about that, but I just wanted to open with the vulnerability of what it is like to tap into whatever that power center is, or whatever that thing is where we're trying to, and I don't want to make an assumption that all of you are doing this. I should say the thing where I am trying to make myself smaller so that I can actually fit in or not be judged, or just, have my primal sense of belonging with our species ultimately, or that I won't be harmed. So I'm going to pause there, and I just want to open it up and see if anyone has any personal story that is relatable that they want to share, something that you're working with, or any follow-up questions for me.